Hello, good afternoon, good morning to those of you joining us from other parts of the world. It's a pleasure to be hosting this LinkedIn Live in March and to be talking about this very important topic of International Women's Day and our sharing our reflections on what's happened this month so far. My name is Natalie Wilkins and I'm the co-CEO of Thriving Talent. And it's a pleasure to see you all again. And I'm joined today by Faye Witteveen, who is a very important person in the Thriving Talent world, and she works for Advance. I'm going to pass the floor to her to introduce herself to you more fully before we get into our questions on the topic for the day. Faye,
Thank
over
you.
to you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And hi, everybody. My name's Faye Witteveen. I'm a program manager at Advance. I've been there, it'll be 4 years on the 1st of April. And what a little bit about Advance, just in case people don't know who we are. We are the leading association for gender equality in Swiss business. And we've been going 10 years. And I'm responsible for the skill building program, which is around 60 workshops that we offer to women and some men and some mixed workshops to empower and bring topics to a safe space for people to exchange on with expert coaches that they can then take back into their companies and put into practice. So that's for individuals. I'm also responsible for a cross-company sort of education sharing between companies who have worked on what we call best practices and can share and learn from each other. And then we have a mentoring cross-company program and something called Connect at Advance, which some of you may have attended, where we bring again topics to the front for people to learn about and get involved in and network. Important about Advance is that we are company membership, not individual membership. So once your company joins Advance, all these things are open to you to benefit from if you happen to work there. And we also want to really work at all levels of the organization. So we work with CEOs too. Natalie, if you've been there, we have the CEO breakfast where we get 30, 40 CEOs together in a room of Swiss businesses and Swiss-based businesses and get into the heart of important topics when it comes to gender equality. So that's
Excellent.
my little spiel on what Advance is, and of course we have IWD too, which happened not last week, the week before.
Yeah, it's an important month, I think, for Advance and for many of us working in this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for those of you who are Swiss based and you haven't, and your organization hasn't joined Advance yet, and you're serious about moving the needle on gender equality in business, I highly encourage you to join. Not only will you have access to everything that Faye's just described, but from what you've seen, Faye, in the reports that you publish annually, member companies do perform much better on gender equality than
Of
other companies in
course.
Switzerland. So it really does give
Yes.
you an edge to
About
be a
4 to
member.
5 percentage points better because we track in the gender intelligence report, we track member companies and non-member companies of how they're doing in terms of women in management positions. And yeah, advanced companies perform a lot better. So
Yeah.
another good reason.
It is absolutely, and one of the reasons why I invited Faye and Advance to be here with us today. I think Faye, actually, you're the first external interviewee or co-host with me on this type of LinkedIn Live since we launched it a couple of years ago, because you do have that exposure to so many companies around Switzerland, and I think there's a lot of themes coming up in these companies and the industries that they represent, many different industries that I think are also transferable and applicable to companies operating in other parts of the world. I think it's a topic that
Mhm.
has a lot of synergies between cultures and geographies. So even if you're listening in from the UK, from the US, I think there'll be a lot to learn and gain from the conversation today. And last week, no, not last week, the week before last, Advance hosted the International Women's Day flagship event in Zurich. And if you think back to that event, Faye, what were some of the key themes or messages that stood out for you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was fantastic. We had 300 people present, and we had around 500 online, 300 to 400 people online joining as well. And it was just a kind of multifaceted event this time, but the overall theme was the beauty of power, and how we were bringing to the audience, trying to give them a new, fresh look on the word power and what it brings, and the positives behind power, and the fact that power, being in power, say in leadership positions, what advantages that gives you for bringing other people on, especially women. And if you can embrace power as a positive, and perhaps get rid of the old-fashioned connotations of the word power, which are often associated with masculine traits, and or authoritarian traits or command and control traits. We really wanted to put a new lens on it. So we had guest speakers talking about the beauty of power, and what it does for them, and what it enables them to do, and essentially to do good in their companies by holding the purse strings, really being in control and in power. So it was a really effective topic. We got lots of very strong positive feedback for it. And part of sort of power is being financially savvy, having control of money, be that your own personal money or be that inside a company, running a P&L, for example. So that was another strong theme, financial education. And I don't know about you, but I'm looking around now and I'm seeing, it's almost like when you have something in your head, you like a red car, you see more red cars. But I'm seeing much more about raising awareness of finances for women, both coming from organizations, insurance industries, for instance, and also from external providers. Because I think we've all become aware now, and a white paper we produced recently highlighted the pension gap, the deficit of women in old age for finances. So finance is another topic, all bound up with power. Another topic was women 40 plus. Again, we just got a white paper together with EY on this unseen hidden talent that just gets overlooked for promotions. And so we kind of, we're trying to be ahead a little bit of what's going on, but we find when we talk about something that it's happening in companies already. These topics are growing from roots, from seeds. So yeah, I'd say finance, women 40 plus, and the challenges they have in progressing their careers, even though they want to. Key message from the white paper is that women 40 plus want to have their career and they want to progress, and they're being there's barriers, there's obstacles coming up.
Yeah, that's a real concern, I think, especially for people in charge of talent systems and leadership development in companies. I think many are now starting to realize that there's been an age barrier to the way that they segment high potential talent, and the pipeline that is, that's used to develop people into those different leadership benches needs to be a lot more broader in terms of age, especially when we know that women do have certain obstacles compared to men, especially around the time of starting a family. And that age of 40 plus is normally when they start to have more energy and time to be invested into their career. But like you say, they're being overlooked for different reasons. So
yeah,
it's a very important message. And I don't know about you, Faye, but I did see a lot of noise being made, and I think rightfully so, by a lot of DEI thought leaders and leaders about the vehicle, the marketing vehicle behind International Women's Day. And I'm sure you've seen some posts and been in conversations about that. There's this seems to be now a tension between the origins of IWD, which came from UN and UN Women, and what seems to be this private organization PR company, which is creating these annual themes around it. And I think a lot of frustration amongst many women and women of color, where companies seem to be jumping on the bandwagon of IWD to market their products, to do some what they call pink washing in around their brands, and this frustration that not enough is being done and not enough progress is being made around gender pay gap, around equity in general for women in the workplace. What are your thoughts on that, Faye?
Yeah, I think in Switzerland, um, it's such a it's complicated, right? This topic of gender equality,
Yeah,
and I do see many companies striving to make conditions better to retain and promote women, and also not just looking at women on this topic, but of course looking at all genders and men especially. So, and I'm from a corporate background. I had a long career in a large corporate, so I have a lot of empathy for companies who are really trying to do things in an environment that is still catching up, let's say, on women's rights, family rights, father rights when it comes to bringing up children. And I think we're caught. Sometimes the companies are caught between a rock and a hard place. We're in Switzerland. Women only got the vote here in 1970, 71. So there is catch up to do, and there are many companies doing really good things. I don't think all companies are pinkwashing at all. I
yeah,
see some really good best practices. As I say, I'm in that pillar space where companies come and share all the things that they are doing. And so and I do think it's also important to continue to empower women in an environment that is catching up, let's say, as it is perfect nowhere in the world. In some countries, we're further ahead. So on things like day schools, on the basics that enable both parents to go and work
yeah,
full time
yeah,
instead of one of them taking a cut. So yeah, I think try not to read all the negative rhetoric, to be honest. I was coming across on LinkedIn about IWD, and it's just a box ticking exercise, because I see also that companies really are making many companies are making a huge effort to know their data and to track their data, and to put initiatives in place to keep and retain women. So
yeah.
and the gender intelligence report shows us that as well.
Absolutely. And I think more and more these companies who are seriously making progress and investing in this are going to be future talent traps for this amazing group of a workforce. They're going to be very, very much sought after as employees in the future.
Mm.
And speaking of that, and you work as a program manager at Advance, and so you see lots of examples of what works, successful gender equality initiatives that have been
Mhm.
implemented by companies. Can you share one example of such an initiative that you've seen that really works and makes a difference?
Yeah, I can, and it's a policy-based initiative, and it's also a lived initiative, right? You can have all the policies in the world, but unless they're put into practice, then they are um, they are just a piece of paper. And for me, I was impressed. It was a couple of years ago now. In fact, I think it was 1921. PwC put a best practice into Advance, and a key element of that was it was like secured for returning parents, male or female, that they could come back and they could work at a percentage, and so 2% are on offer, 60%, and get their they can work at 60% for 4 weeks, and they get their full pay on return
Mm,
after a maternity or a paternity leave. And they could work at 80% and at 8 weeks and get their full pay. And for me, that's an absolute concrete offer that supports return to work after becoming a parent. And I wish something like that had been in place when
mm,
I returned to work after my kids
yeah, me
were
too.
born, especially in Switzerland, where the maternity leave is um, generally quite short in comparison to, say, the UK, where
Yes.
I'm from. And I was really impressed with that. And then I've seen more companies do it too. NatWest has a phase back program, they call it, and you can come as a returning parent. You can work at 12 weeks and get full pay in the way that suits you to readjust to work and the new schedule that you might have with your baby. And that again is available to men and women. And NatWest goes as far as to have 12 weeks paternity leave as well, a
Mm,
shared parental leave. So father can take it, mother can take it. So it's those
yeah.
concrete things that when you hear from employees how it's affected their life at a huge, moment of change in their life, and you hear how basically it's made them um, either not reduce their percentage, which is super important for women for the pension gap, as we know in the future, or has
Mm,
made them actually decide to return to work. Because I know from experience that many women at the point of having a child, or second child especially, really have that debate: me going back to is it worth me going back to work after such a short maternity leave? There's no place in the creche or the cripper
yeah,
for my kid. I know, what are we going to do? So yeah, I
yeah,
like these very much, these concrete examples, and I like that people use them, of course, and take them. And there are role models inside these companies, male role models, for example, who other men can look to and say, yeah, I'm going to take my 12-week leave. P&G is another example. They have a good 8-week paternity leave that has to be taken in one chunk. These 8 weeks
yeah,
have to be taken because they want to create the bond and the continuing relationship between the child and the father that supports the mother's career going forward as well. So yeah,
yeah.
really, really good, strong initiatives that are in place. And there's many others, but you asked for one, and I even gave you two.
I love that. I love that initiative, and it really speaks to the work that we do around caring and career and how companies can support those moments that matter to people in their company. Because as we know, you've just described it, that return to work after having a baby or a second or a third, it's strife with challenges, and for a company and employer to make that easier, an easier choice for everyone.
Yeah.
I know the research that we carry out, anything between 20 to 35% of people, especially women after maternity leave, opt out of their career after they've had the baby, and that's a huge loss for the workforce in any company and in our economy. And like you say, it then exasperated with this pension gap towards the end of their career. So something very easy, I think, that companies can do. And I think if I can think of another one that companies, and it's also related, it's very successful, I believe, and it's definitely linked to caring and career. Not always the cheapest, but I think when you actually crunch the numbers and
Mhm.
build a business case for this, it actually it goes along where the ROI is quite impressive, and that's to extend paternity leave. Now, in certain countries, in the European Union, for example, or in the UK, there is legislation now that requires companies provide extended paternity leave or secondary carer leave. But I think in Switzerland, that's still quite something recent. It was only legislated to 2 weeks a couple of years ago, and now there's moves in the political sphere to make that longer, which is great. And there's a lot of companies making moves to make that even
Absolutely.
better.
Yeah.
But I think we're both on the same page with this. Gender equality starts at home.
Mm.
And when you give men the space to be able to lean into that family life and into that caring role more and to support it financially with leave and phase returns, like you've discussed, I think that really plays a lot to the organizational culture for
Absolutely. Yeah.
men in that company to appreciate that role better, and to see the challenges that come when people play that role in their personal life. And yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's a really successful move that
Yeah.
companies can invest in as
And
well.
just good for society, in my opinion, too,
Yeah,
not just for
absolutely.
organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about the companies, we're moving into this topic of culture, and attitudes and behaviors. Is there anything that can be a hindrance to gender equality? And are there any concrete signs or red flags that companies or leaders in companies need to keep a watch out for around their culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to look at your data. You need to see what's your exit rate of women after maternity, for example. I know with PwC, they track that too. So they don't just offer this flexibility deal, they actually track what's happening with their people who are having a leave of absence. So I think you need to know who's leaving, and why. Find out why. Exit interviews are not consistently done. I found, um, And I think that's a key source of information for you as a company. Why wouldn't you want to know that? I think obviously pulse surveys, employee surveys are going to give you some information about the health, let's say, of your organization, and about how people feel that even if you're making inroads into your diversity numbers, let's say you have a healthy balance of men and women and all genders and all other areas of diversity that you can measure, then that's something that is helpful, right? You can
Absolutely.
You can see that, and also your absenteeism. You know, what's the morale like? Why are people off? Are they taking time off? Yeah, what's the and also like is there even diversity? So you've got, if there is, and your pulse surveys are going to tell you if you're building an inclusive culture, and therefore people are happy with that. And but if you're not even at the stage where you're getting diverse people through the door, then that's something to be concerned about, because you're not going to get the best talent. They're going to go elsewhere. They're going to choose a company that they can see themselves thriving in. So yeah, quite a few red flags, and it comes down to a lot of it to data, both quantitative and qualitative data too.
Yes, yeah, those are really important points, especially the qualitative, because when you're looking around your team in your department, and it can be very visibly clear where the gender balance or imbalance might be, and then you start asking questions as to, well, why don't we have a more balanced shortlist for this next round of interviews, or why didn't we have anyone being proposed, for this promotion from whether it's male, female, or X, and you hear the reasons and excuses you're given. I think that's also a very clear sign as to maybe what are the attitudes and myths that might be prevailing inside the culture that stops that gender equality from being present.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not really enough just to do pulse surveys. I think if you can have lots of comments in your pulse surveys, and you've got a way to analyze those comments to really get a feeling of what's happening, then fine. But I really think you have to go talk to people too. And the senior leadership teams have a I think it's really, and the company I worked at, with the CEO would come and talk to us. He'd do road shows. He'd go around and really talk to people, find out what is going on, because you get a different story from the voice of someone than you do on a electronic pulse survey, I think. So I think that's really important as well. Take the opportunity for the leadership team to really ask. Excuse me a second. I need a sip of water.
No problem. No, it's really important for the leadership team to be asking. And I think maybe another quick win to share on this topic is, and this is what we advise in our consulting for a lot of companies to be doing, is to also run some focus groups on the back of the survey results to validate why exactly the sentiment is the way it is. Or if you have a gender-based goal and you want to, at the starting point of this journey, and you want to understand what really are the barriers that both men, women, and people of other genders experience, is to form these informal focus groups and ask those questions, because they will really tell you what they see as the barriers, but they'll also give you some fantastic ideas of what could help. And a lot of these ideas don't need to cost the earth. It could be as simple as, like the example we shared earlier around phased returns, but it could also be as simple as, actually, when you are making important decisions in the company and you don't have a gender representation at the table, why don't you invite some people, even at the lower levels, to make up that representation and bring in their views to make a more balanced, informed decision making? That doesn't cost anything. It costs the leadership team to be open and have the courage to take on those points of views.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes companies are quite hierarchical. And at these senior meetings, there's a kind of cut-off point to who can be invited, what level
Yeah,
the person needs to be at. And as we look at the numbers, the number of women reduces, of course, the higher up you go. And so there is a scarcity, and more so in some industries, of women. So you're going to have to go further down because often the entry point is 50-50, right?
yeah,
Men and women, and then it dwindles as you get higher up. So yeah, you're going to have to go. So it requires, yeah, some change in doing things how we've always done things. You know,
yeah,
changing the norms a bit can bring in that different, diverse perspective. Actually, at the CEO breakfast in September, we brought in uh, generation 20 something to talk to the CEOs, and almost like a reverse mentoring kind of
yes,
session, which really was very helpful and useful for the CEOs because they got, first of all, outside view of that generation and what they want for their careers and what's important to them. And yeah, it was a conversation, right, a dialogue that was very powerful. It worked really well. And there are other initiatives. The University of St. Gallen has something called Leaders for Equality, and that
hmm,
is in essence doing a survey of what men think about gender equality and what women think about gender equality. The differences is quite big. Men don't
yes,
think it's as bad as women think it is, and then bringing them all together for ongoing dialogue and using the data as the starting point. So that's quite powerful. Those
yeah.
initiatives, like focus groups, like you've just said. Yeah,
Yeah, being able to share those perceptions and the gaps in perception, I think, are really eye-opening for senior leaders. And some clients are even running shadow boards they've
mm,
established and have shadow boards made up of different diversity represented
I
in
like
there
that.
that isn't present in the actual board. Yeah, I really like it too. And taking those inputs really seriously in the way that they run business and make decisions, I think is
Absolutely.
another way to really leverage that value of diversity
Hmm.
in your company. Now, we've got a few minutes left, and I encourage anyone who's present on the live with us to also share some best practices and quick wins that you've come across or personally experienced so that we can all learn and from one another, and sharing, as I like to say, is caring. So please do that. Or if you have any questions for Faye and I to answer in these last few minutes, then do post those in the chat as well. And if any of you weren't able to come to this live, we are recording this and we'll be posting it on the page following today. I have one more question for you, Faye.
Hmm.
I know
Go
we've
for
been
it.
sharing lots of quick wins, but is there any other win, big or small, that you think companies can do, that they can implement to further gender equality in the workplace?
I think they can obviously look at their data. I've talked about data quite a bit, but it's so important to convince still teams and management teams, leadership teams who don't think there's a problem, even
Mm,
though you could give them a printout of their leadership team where everybody at least looks the same. They might not all think the same. Diversity of thought, of course, can be there, but on paper, they're all looking the same. Then it's not sending a good signal out to the world, to diverse people that might want to come and work in the company. So data is really important, and then also educating the senior leadership team as to
mm,
the the problem. So going back to the focus group surveys, giving them the information and giving them the data of people who are leaving, right? If it's a
yeah,
talent drain, that is not good for the bottom line. So I think it's also not just educating about the data, it's like telling them what they can do or facilitating what them to come to the point of ownership of
yeah,
this gender equality topic and being responsible um, for it. Because when people look up, right, to the leadership team, what they see and what they hear coming from there is going to influence how they behave. And it's all
yeah.
about behavior. A lot of this
Mhm.
is how leadership teams, if they're fully male or mostly male, it's about how they engender gender equality. What are they doing personally with their behavior? How are they bringing on talent? How are they understanding how men and women's careers operate differently, not just because of the timing issues, the rush hours, as we talked about, but also the mentality of how men and women handle their careers, because there is a difference.
Yeah.
And I think that the more male and female leaders can understand this and not shy away from it, but embrace it, again, because it's a quality, it's diverse quality there with men and women, then I think they are going to create a culture where people will stay and will want to grow and join. So, and
Yeah.
that's for me, it's hard. I mean, harder said than done, right? We're trying in that direction because we have a virtual reality experience where male leaders step into the body of a female executive and experience her working day, and we find that's an eye opener. Once you've had this experiential, emotional, let's say, experience of what it's like to be discriminated against, the conversation that comes after it is at a deeper level than just showing data or just
Yes.
doing an unconscious bias PowerPoint training or something like that. So
Absolutely.
there are other practical things, right? There's how you do your recruitment, how you do your promotions, how you have bias call outers in promotion meetings, discussions about talent. You know, we're all biased. That's the other whole topic. We all have our biases. So the more you can be aware of that as a leader, as a manager, then the more likely you are to challenge yourself with your decision making about who's right for a role or who's in the running for a promotion. Yeah, a lot of sort of psychology there that I find very interesting, and it's super important, I think, for leaders to step into and own and start to own as
Absolutely.
part of their currently what they do and as their legacy as well.
Absolutely. And I think once they've started to shift their worldview and understand these different experiences that they've, from their privilege haven't necessarily experienced themselves, I would add to your points is to really invest in equity, because this is the true path to true inclusion, is looking at who benefits and who's disadvantaged in the way these different processes and policies are actually rolled out and carried out inside the companies, like you say, from recruitment to promotion. And there's a lot of great best practices that we can share around that if anyone's interested. And we have a lot of tools to equip clients to do the same for themselves internally. It's not rocket science, but it's really about slowing down, challenging yourself in the way something's designed or currently carried out, but also getting some best practices of how other companies have done it to have a positive impact and shift the way those decisions are being made so that outcomes are more fair.
Yes.
For everyone, not just for men and women, but for everyone.
Mhm.
So that's maybe where we'll leave people is, what's your journey between March 2024 to March 2025? What are some of those wins and those actions that you can take, big or small, so that you can celebrate that progress that hopefully you're going to make over the next 12 months? Thank you so much, Faye, for being part of today's conversation
Very much for having me.
and for sharing these insights. I think this is really great. And hopefully maybe we'll see you again on a LinkedIn
Yes.
Live soon.
Great.
Thank
Thank you
you
very
for
much.
everyone for joining us, for listening to this recording. And as I said, if you have any questions or any ideas to share, feel free to post underneath this LinkedIn Live recording, or reach out to Faye and myself. I would be really happy to hear from you. Okay. Take
Thank you
good
very
care,
much.
everyone, and see you at the next one.
Bye.
Thanks, Faye. Bye.
Bye.